Tonight I came to address a very crucial issue, and it's one that I cannot possibly teach halakha unless I study through this with you. Some people here may have studied this before. Some people may have never heard of this before. When you build a building, you have to start with foundations. 2.5 years ago, I started a class in San Diego called Foundations. The purpose of the Foundations course was to help those people who are going through a Giur process study the foundations of Judaism from the ground up. And quickly I noticed that the community and those who study with me elsewhere around the world had asked to join my Giur class. That's Hanan, by the way, we just spoke about him. That's him. Baruch Hashem. I said, what are you guys in a Giur class for? You're Jewish. And they said, what do you mean? But we don't have any foundations. You're religious. You went to Jewish schools. You went to yeshiva. And the truth is that a lot of people study Torah. A lot of people have been involved in the Jewish community without the proper foundations. And when you build a building without foundations, it doesn't make a difference how much money you spend on that building. But if you don't lay the proper foundations, everything is given to crumble afterwards. When we study halakha, there are a lot of things that we assume, but we're not clear about. We don't know about. The greatest question that I get asked every single time is, Rabbi, how many Torahs were given in Mount Sinai? And they don't mean an oral Torah or a written Torah. They ask me, how many Torah? One for the Sfaradim, one for the Ashkenazim, one for the Yemenites, one for the Hasidim, one for... How many Torahs did we get at Mount Sinai? Because it can't be that one thing is okay for you to do, and another thing is not okay for me to do. How is it that something that I can eat, you can't eat? How is it that something that I'm allowed to perform on Shabbat, you can't perform on Shabbat? It doesn't make any sense. And I think that anyone who not just begins to study Judaism, but learns anything about Judaism is plagued with this question. Moshe Emet, Moshe is true. Torah Emet, his Torah is true. How many Torahs do we have? And before we can even begin to explain Sfaradim this, Ashkenazim that, we have to go through a basic history lesson. And Baruch Hashem, you don't have to take the lesson from me, but none other than the Rambam, our rabbi, our teacher, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, wrote an introduction to his book, the Mishneh Torah. Most people skip the introductions to books. But normally I find that most of the books in my library, I haven't gone through most of the books, but I've read all the introductions. Because the introductions have in them jewels, gems, they're real classic works. They tell you things that you can't find elsewhere. So today I wanted to walk you through the introduction of the Rambam to his Mishneh Torah, to his Code of Jewish Law. Anyone know anything about the Rambam? Who was he? Maimonides. Okay, that's his English name.
He was a doctor.
He was a doctor, yes.
A rabbi from Cordoba.
He was a rabbi from Spain, and also North Africa, and also Egypt. He traveled a little bit, not out of his own free will. Religious persecution takes you all over the world. He wrote a code of Jewish law called the Mishneh Torah, that's right, 14 volumes, otherwise known as the Yad HaChazakah. The Yad in numerical value is 14.
Where did you say he was from?
Spain, North Africa, Egypt. His life took him on journeys. The Rambam was also, perhaps, I'm not afraid to say, one of the greatest rabbis who lived since the times of the Talmud. In terms of being authoritative, yes, in every place you're going to find people who don't like the Rambam. Those who don't like the Rambam, about them it says in the Torah, "Besodam al tavo nafshi." Don't let my soul be with them. I have nothing to do with people who don't like the Rambam. They're not really part of Am Yisrael in the first place. The Rambam, the approach that he brought to Judaism was clarity. This is what the Rambam is about. If I had to give the Rambam one word, it's clarity. When you read the Rambam, it's almost like you think you're listening to Moshe Rabbeinu on Mount Sinai. There's no arguments, there's no disputes, there's no contradictions, there's no problems. Everything just makes sense. And tonight I want to make sense of the Torah. But unfortunately, when you speak with clarity, and you speak with conviction, and you speak truth, oftentimes the people around you don't like it so much. And the Rambam, his whole life, faces persecution, not just from the non-Jewish community, but I perhaps would argue that even more from the Jewish community. Until today. Until today. There are rabbis here in this town, in my town, in your town, wherever you come from, who follow rabbis who have said wonderful things about the Rambam, such as his books should still be burned. Everybody here has read a book from somebody. Everybody here. Okay, I know some of you. Not everybody here. Most of you here have read a book from people who belong to an ideology who wish that they could burn Maimonides' books again. But the Rambam brings to the world something nobody else did. But he knows that. And that's why when he starts his book, in the name of Hashem, Lord of the world, then I will not be ashamed when I gaze at all your mitzvot. As le'evosh b'habiti al kol mitzvotecha. Says the Rambam, why do I have to be embarrassed? I'm going to talk Torah now. I'm going to tell you the truth. I should be embarrassed to tell you the truth. I have to worry about what you're going to think about the truth. Shulchan Aruch starts with similar words. Quoting Pirkei Avot. You should be brazen like a lion. Don't be afraid. Evil people will speak bad about you everywhere in the world. The first thing you have to make sure that if you're a person of truth, you will face opposition. It's never going to happen that way, that you're going to be a person of truth and everyone's going to love you. Why? When you're a liar, everybody loves you. You tell them how good they look, you tell them how nice they are, how kind they are. You lie to everybody, everybody's going to like you. When you're a truthful person, though, you're going to get on people's nerves. And he knows that. So let's watch as the Rambam gets on people's nerves. The mitzvot given to Moshe at Mount Sinai were all given together with their explanations as implied by the verse, and I will give you the tablets of stone, the Torah and the mitzvah. The Torah itself tells us that at Mount Sinai we received tablets of stone, the Torah and the mitzvah. What does Torah mean in Hebrew? A teaching. And mitzvah means, closest word in English? Commandment. This is a basic rabbinic doctrine that we believe that in Har Sinai Hashem gave us a written Torah, a chumash. When you point in the synagogue, V'zot Torah Moshe, this is the Torah that Moshe gave me, that's the Torah Moshe gave me. But alongside the Torah that Moshe gave me, I also have explanations to the Torah. That's referred to normally as the oral law, the Torah Sheba'al Peh. What does it mean? I'm comparing something not holy. My wife gives me a shopping list for Shabbat. It used to be on paper, now it's on your iPhone. And she says, get this and this and this and this. And I say, which kind of cucumbers? She wrote cucumbers. So I know to ask. She says, Persian cucumbers. Okay, but it doesn't say that on the list. But I know that when it says cucumbers and I want more information, somebody wrote this list. And somebody explained this list to me. We believe that Moshe Rabbeinu received the written Torah on Mount Sinai. And alongside, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving him a Torah, he's explaining to him everything that it says inside of the Torah. And that is called the oral law. You do not have a book of oral law today. We don't have a pure oral law today. Yes, we have a Mishnah, we have a Talmud, we're going to talk about that. But for the most part, the oral law is when I read the Torah, and you read the Torah, and I heard my father read the Torah, my grandfather read the Torah, and my grandmother read the Torah. My grandmother, she didn't know how to read until she was 50 years old. Her father was a rabbi in Yemen, but it was against the law in Yemen to teach women how to read and write. When people ask me if women can come to my classes, I say, what am I living in Yemen still? What kind of world are we going to have, a Jewish world where ladies don't come to classes and study Torah and teach Torah and write books of Torah? That's not what it should be. My grandmother at the age of 50 went to Ulpan in Israel. Finally her kids left the house. She left Yemen, came to Israel. In Ulpan, the first letter that she wrote to my father was, Allah Teman, cursed be the land of Yemen. They didn't let me to read and write. When my grandmother was 3 or 4, she used to hide in the closet in her father's schoolroom. He had like a one-room schoolhouse. And in Yemen, every boy knew how to read the Tanakh by heart. They knew, memorized the whole Tanakh. And so my grandmother would hide in the cupboard, and she would memorize everything that the boys were reading, she memorized also. I remember my grandmother, I would sit at the table, my grandfather was here, I would sit like where you're sitting right now, we would read Chumash together, my grandmother was frying schnitzel in the kitchen, she was making something for Shabbat, and she would correct us in our reading of the Chumash. So for 47 years, she knew the whole Tanakh by heart, but she didn't know how to read it. And at the age of 50, she finally was able to open up a book and associate those letters with the Torah that she knew by heart. We believe that we had the Torah. And when my grandmother explained to me a verse, that explanation that she gave me, it says you should tie these words of Hashem onto your heart. What does that mean? Our Chachamim explained. Moshe Rabbeinu told us that verse means to tie tefillin on your hand. That's what it means. The rabbis didn't invent this years later in Babylon. This is what Moshe Rabbeinu explained to us in Mount Sinai. The Torah refers to the written law, the mitzvah, its explanation, and Hashem commanded us to fulfill the Torah according to the instructions of the mitzvah. The mitzvah is called the oral law. So when Hashem commands us to follow the stones, the Torah and the mitzvah, the creator of the world is demanding from us to follow both the Torah and the explanations that he gave Moshe on Mount Sinai. So far I can tell you that if Hashem gave one Torah and one explanation, There are no Sfaradim and Ashkenazim in Mount Sinai. There's only one Torah and one explanation. So we're going to have to understand how that becomes many Torahs with many explanations. Moshe, our teacher, personally transcribed the entire Torah before he died. He gave a Torah scroll to each tribe and placed another scroll in the ark as a testimonial, as it states. Okay. The mitzvah, the explanation of the Torah, he did not transcribe. I skipped a paragraph. Instead, he commanded it verbally to the elders, to Yoshua, and to the totality of Israel. As it says, be careful to observe everything that I prescribe to you. For this reason, it's called the oral law. So it's an oral law because
He didn't write it.
you didn't write it down. Very good. It's oral. Even though the oral law was not transcribed, Moshe, our teacher, taught it in its entirety in his court to the 70 elders. Elazar, Pinchas, and Yoshua received the tradition from Moshe. If you remember the first chapter of Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our fathers, starts off with Moshe received the Torah in Sinai, and he gave it to Yoshua, and Yoshua all the way till Anshe Knesset Golad, or the men of the great assembly. This is the Torah that Moshe is teaching. Every rabbi from Moshe taught his students everything that was told to him on Mount Sinai. In particular, Moshe transmitted the oral law to Yoshua, who was his primary disciple. So even though he taught it to many people, his continuation was Yehoshua, and instructed him regarding it. Similarly, throughout his life, Yehoshua taught the oral law. Many elders received the tradition from him. Eli, who's Eli? Who here knows Tanakh well? Yeah, where he was in the Mishkan. Eli received the tradition from the elders from Pinchas. Shmuel received the tradition from Eli in his court. David, who's David? Yeah, King David. He received the Torah from Shmuel in his court. Achia of Shiloh. This is an interesting character. What are you going to do with this? That's up to you. Achia of Shiloh was one of those who experienced the exodus from Egypt. He was a Levi and heard teachings from Moshe. He was, however, of low stature in Moshe's age. Afterwards, he received the tradition from David and his court. Someone knows a little bit of Jewish history? How long? Don't tell me. Was it a long time between Moshe and David? A long time. According to this, Achia lived for many years. And in the times of Moshe, he was a teenager. It was 200. By the time of David HaMelech, he was already grown up. 400. I don't know how old exactly Achia was, but he only received the tradition. He only joined the link of tradition in the generation of David HaMelech. Eliyahu, that's Eliyahu the prophet, received the tradition from Achia of Shiloh in his court. Elisha, that's a student of Eliyahu, received it from Eliyahu. Yehoyada, the priest, received the tradition from Elisha in his court. Zechariah, these are prophets we know of. Received the tradition from Yehoyada in his court. Hosea received it. Okay. Amos received, and so on and so forth. I'm skipping till page 2. Mordechai the linguist, Zerubbabel, and many other sages, 120 elders in all. Which Mordechai is this? Now, the story of Purim is now. Mordechai receives the tradition from all this link of people beforehand. The last surviving member of this group was Shimon the Just. Shimon the Just wrote a prayer that you say every day. Which prayer? You know?
Shema? No.
What? Ashrei. That's David HaMelech wrote that? It comes after Ashrei. We call the silent prayer the Amidah. What do Ashkenazim call it? Shemona Esrei. 18 blessings. But if you count the blessings, how many are there? 19. They didn't make a mistake. It used to be 18 blessings. And Shimon added number 19.
Is the last paragraph before?
Did I make it up? Maybe Rachel is right. Did I make a mistake, Chava? Shmuel HaKatan wrote. Never mind. Chava, that was a nice piece of fake Jewish history. Why let the facts get in the way of a good story? Okay, for real, it was not him then. He was included among the 120 elders and received the oral law from all of them. He served as the high priest after Ezra. Antignos of Socho, these names, if you study Pirkei Avot, are going to be familiar to you. This is the beginning of Pirkei Avot. Received the tradition from Shimon the Just. I'm skipping the next paragraph, it's just more names and more names. Hillel and Shammai, you know these rabbis? Who is Hillel? This is for real this time. Who is Hillel? The famous Beit Hillel that you hear about. He was the rabbi of the academy. His friend was Shammai. Shammai was known to be more tough, more strict. Hillel to be more lenient. There's a lot of complexity in that relationship. One day, B'ezrat Hashem, we'll talk about it more. They received it from Shmaya and Naftalion and their court. Who are Shmaya and Naftalion? They're famous that they were converts to Judaism. If not them, there's an argument maybe their parents were. Either way that it happens, there are groups of Jews. Like I told you, I'm not afraid. The Torah is Torah. I don't care who you are and how many rabbis you have. There are groups of Jews, for whatever reason, they believe that people who converted to Judaism somehow are less Jewish than they are. Let me tell you the truth, that if you belong to such a community or you go to such a Beit Knesset, it's a mitzvah for you to leave such a community. Because how many times are we commanded to keep Shabbat in the Torah? Twice. Shamor and Zachor. 3 is what? Kashrut. Meat and milk. We're commanded 3 times to meat and milk. How many times to love the convert? It's an argument. There's 2 opinions. One says 36 times, and the other one 46 times. So there's a new religion born in the Jewish community. It's checking for bugs. Yeah, they have this religion. It's everything has to be checked for bugs now. I also agree you have to check for bugs. But you have to use your eyes, not someone else's magnifying glass. And this checking for bugs, they tell you the reason you have to be so careful about it is because you violate 7 biblical prohibitions. Like it's, 7 biblical prohibitions. Lashon hara. If you speak every kind of lashon hara possible, you can hit somewhere like 34 biblical prohibitions. Treating a person who converted to Judaism any less than your brother or your sister, you already automatically violated 36 biblical prohibitions. It's not worth it. Take your kippah, throw it in the trash, stop keeping Shabbat, and go home. We have a commandment to obliterate the evil that's inside of our midst. This is one of those evils. But this evil is not new. Don't worry, they didn't invent it over here in the United States. This evil existed also in the generation of Hillel and Shammai. Hillel travels to another Jewish community. And they don't know who he is. He's just another rabbi. They don't know he's the famous Hillel. And at a certain point in time, there's a halachic question that comes up in the community. Someone remember this, Malach? What's the question that was asked? About Hillel. He comes, they ask, how do you carry the knife to sacrifice the Pesach offering in the temple? How do you do that? So nobody knew the answer. All the rabbis didn't know the answer to this question. Hillel is sitting there in the back of the Midrash quiet. He's not telling anybody anything. At a certain point, he sees nobody has the answer. He raises his hand. He says, let me tell you, the way that it was done, they would put the knife into the wool of the lamb, the sheep, and it would walk its own knife to the Beit Mikdash. He said, wow, how do you know the answer to that question? You're the only rabbi who knows the answer to this question. So I'll tell you, my rabbis were Shmaya and Avtalion. And all of you rabbis had too much pride, too much arrogance to study Torah from people who converted to Judaism. But I didn't. I made them my rabbis, and I therefore became the next link in the chain. And our Chachamim tell us that because of that, Shemaiah and Avtalion, and then Hillel received the tradition. These are people who decided to follow true Judaism and stay part of the link of the Jewish community. Hillel and Shammai.
So they were converts?
They were students of Shemaiah and Avtalion who were converts.
Who were converts?
Yes. And they are meaning anyone today who is Jewish is a direct descendant. In terms, the reason you have a Torah is because of Shemaiah and Avtalion. Nobody else in the generation had Torah like these 2 people did. Nobody. Also. But here in Mamash, I'm talking about themselves. The bottom line is, if I would make you a list of people in the Tanakh, and I would say, hey, who wants to date them? Everybody who belongs to the Orthodox community wouldn't date anybody. Avraham Avinu, he comes from a bad family. His dad's an idol worshiper. Yitzchak, his brother is a terrorist, is Ishmael. Yaakov, his brother is a Christian. He's a priest. Everybody in the David, his whole life, miskin. He grew up in a broken home. Nobody wanted him. It was who? Moshe Rabbeinu, very good. It's not even Moshe was raised by Goyim. God forbid. You know what they did to Moshe? All of these things you could possibly say about nobody would get married in the Tanakh. Think about this shidduch. You have Lot, Betuel, murderers. We have a lot of people in our lineage. Nobody today would get married. Sometimes it takes worth taking a peek at us. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and Rabbi Shimon, the son of Hillel, the elder, received the tradition from Hillel and Shammai in his courts. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 students who were great sages and received the tradition from him. They were Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef. That's the famous Rabbi Akiva. He received from Rabbi Elazar the Great, Yosef, his father, was a righteous convert. Again and again and again and again, you're going to find that inside of our tradition, from our greatest chachamim that exist, are people who are not necessarily born into the Jewish people. Accept it as a fact. This is the truth. This is the mitziut. Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Meir, a son of righteous converts, received the tradition from Rabbi Akiva. Next paragraph. Shimon Rabbi Akiva's college received the tradition from Rabbi Elazar the Great. I'm skipping a paragraph. Rabban Gamliel the elder received the tradition from Rabban Shimon, his father, the son of Hillel. I'm skipping a paragraph. Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabban Shimon, and referred to as Rabbeinu HaKadosh. There are people today who are inclined to call their rabbi the holy rabbi. Only one rabbi is the holy rabbi. Rabbeinu HaKadosh. When you see the words in rabbinic literature, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, our holy rabbi, it refers to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Rabbi Yehuda, the prince. He received the tradition from his father, from Elazar ben Shamua, and from Rabban Shimon and his colleagues. Now it's important to talk about Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. I'm in the bottom of page 2, the bottom right paragraph. We're going to talk about a book called the Mishnah. So if you have your paper, we discussed the Tanakh, that's the Torah, the prophets. You heard a lot of those names. I didn't make this chart. So you'll see like Midrash, Zohar. I didn't make this. I just printed it for you. The next major canon of Jewish law is going to be the Mishnah. The Mishnah is a work that was written by men, by Rabbeinu HaKadosh. It's a work of oral law. It's not the oral law, because what is the oral law? It's oral. It's what was said to Moshe Rabbeinu on Mount Sinai. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is writing down parts of the oral law, and I'll explain that in just a minute. So we're discussing now where it says the Mishnah. Rabbeinu HaKadosh composed the Mishnah. From the days of Moshe, our teacher, until Rabbeinu HaKadosh, no one had composed the text for the purpose of teaching the oral law in public. Instead, in each generation, top of page 3, the head of the court or the prophet of the generation would take notes of the teachings which he received from his masters for himself and teach them verbally in public. Similarly, according to his own potential, each individual would write notes for himself of what he heard regarding the explanation of the Torah, its laws, the new concepts that were deduced in each generation concerning laws that were not communicated by the oral law, but rather deduced using one of the 13 principles of biblical, forgive me, I don't know how to read that word in English, and accepted by the High Court. Top of page 3. What is the Mishnah? We didn't answer that question yet. How was the oral law taught in every generation? Let's say Moshe Rabbeinu taught the oral law to Yoshua, and he taught it to other people also. Yoshua became his primary disciple. How does Yehoshua teach the oral law to the next generation? How? Okay. How does he do it though? Like this. He gets everyone together, and they discuss. They read the Chumash together, and they go through each law and every law, and they decide, what did I hear from Moshe Rabbeinu about this law? Next, court does the same thing. The rabbis, the prophets, the chachamim. There are some things though that were never spoken about in Mount Sinai. Like what? Using your car on Shabbat. Does the Torah talk about cars on Shabbat? No. So how do I know what the laws of cars? I don't really. How do we pretend we know what the laws of cars on Shabbat are? We have rules. The same thing. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't just pass laws. He passed rules on how we can deduce new laws. So there are ways that you learn from one law and you extrapolate to another law. And so every court in its own generation, they had new inventions, new things that happened. And they have to deal with what is halakha going to say about a new reality that exists in our generation. And that is a valid part of the oral law. The oral law is not dead. And the chachamim are able to include new ideas into their oral law. And so Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, he recorded those ideas also. The situation continued until the age of Rabbeinu HaKadosh. He collected all the teachings, all the laws, all the explanations and commentaries that were heard from Moshe, our teacher, and which were taught by the courts in each generation concerning the entire Torah. From all these, he composed the text of the Mishnah. He taught it to the sages in public and revealed it to the Jewish people, who all wrote it down. They spread it in all places so the oral law would not be forgotten by the Jewish people. Why did Rabbeinu HaKadosh make such an innovation instead of perpetuating the status quo? Why did he decide to write it down? It's an oral law. Why are you writing it down? Because he saw the students becoming fewer. New difficulties constantly arising. The Roman Empire spreading itself throughout the world and becoming more powerful. And the Jewish people wandering and becoming dispersed to the far ends of the world. Therefore, he composed a single text that would be available to everyone, so that it could be studied quickly and would not be forgotten. Throughout his entire life, he and his court taught the Mishnah to the masses. Let me speak to you in English now. Enough reading. My kids are my kids. So my kids and my wife's kids, they can never be quiet. It's just part of their DNA. They don't have a chance. Don't worry about it. Rabbi Yudanasi says people are becoming dispersed. The non-Jews are occupying the land of Israel. The Jewish people are leaving Israel. We're not staying together in the same place. There are problems. What happens when there are problems? You go into survival mode. When you operate in survival mode, when the Jewish people operate in survival mode, who has time to sit around the table and study all day long the whole oral law? How many people here know the whole Chumash by heart, let alone the Chumash with the oral law? The Rambam says, what is a person who's considered a part-time learning person? He works most of the time. He's not a Torah scholar. Somebody who studies Torah 9 hours a day. That's like part-time Torah student. Who has 9 hours to do anything? Facebook. That's what you have 9 hours for. Aside from that, what do you have 9 hours for? Think about it. Where can you put aside in your life enough hours every single day to know the whole oral law? The people who study Talmud, 1 page of Talmud a day for 1 hour every day. Let's pretend that everyone knows what they're reading about over there. It takes them 7.5 years to finish the Talmud in 1 cycle. By the time they reach the next year, they forgot everything they studied the year before. So they really know what you're talking about? Who has the time? Rabbi Yudanasi knows this. He sees the Jewish people are entering survival mode. And he says, listen, I'm supposed to have an oral law. I'm supposed to wish that all the academies will get together and every Jewish person is going to know the law, but I know how it's going to work. We're going to find ourselves in Rome. We're going to find ourselves all over the world. Who's going to teach Torah? If I don't write it down, we're going to lose the Torah. And he decides to go out on a limb and do something that no one ever did before. What does he do exactly? He goes to Uriel's Bet Midrash. He says, hey guys, I'm talking about the topic of Shema Yisrael. When do you say Shema at night? What did you hear? He tells me an opinion. Kanan, what did you hear? 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 And all he does in the Mishnah, he writes a topic and records the opinions of different rabbis who said something. He doesn't give you the rule. He doesn't tell you what to do with that information. He simply records topics and opinions. What's the first Mishnah in the Talmud? Brachot. What's the first words? Me'matai korin et Shema ba'aravim. When do you read Shema at night? You have to read Shema in the morning and the night. When do you read it at night? What's the answer to the question? When can you start saying Shema? So it says you have to read Shema when you go to sleep, right? B'shoch b'cha, when you go to sleep. So what do you learn from here? It has to be at night. When do people start going to sleep? All the rabbis agree. When 3 stars come out, it starts to get dark, that's when people start going to sleep. That was before Facebook. No, for real. I once saw a letter, I think from the Ben Ish Chai, one of the Chachamim in Baghdad. He writes, you know how it used to be? He said, the sun sets. What time is sunset today? 6? So people go to the synagogue, they pray Arvit. 6 o'clock, 6:10, they're home. Please have a seat anywhere you want. 6:10, they come home to have some dinner. What do they do after dinner? Sleep. Yeah, maybe you're rich, you have a candle, you burn it for 15 minutes to read a book. And what are you going to, Monopoly? I don't know what you're going to do over there. And then you go to sleep. At 6:30, yeah, you go to sleep. When do you wake up? Sunrise. The Ben Ish Chai says most people woke up in Baghdad to come to the midnight tikkun chatzot with the rabbi. They would pray for about an hour. So let's say midnight is 1 o'clock. So you got your 6 hours of sleep in. Okay. You come to class with the rabbi. You pray for a little bit. Ben Ish Chai says, you know those people who slack off, the guys who show up for kiddush at the end of services on Shabbat, they would come for sunrise prayer. You know, they would show up at 4:45. They were the lazy people. 4:45, you come, you pray. 45 minutes later, you're home, you eat breakfast, you go to work, the day starts over again. So nobody's saying Shema at 9 o'clock at night. 9 o'clock at night is the middle of your sleep. You say Shema when 3 stars come out. All the rabbis agree about this. What they don't agree about is until when you can say Shema. And what does Rabbi Yudanasi do? He records 3 opinions. The first, Rabbi Elazar, he says until 4 hours into the night. Why? People are still going to sleep in the beginning of the night. After that, even though people are sleeping, they're not going to sleep anymore. And therefore he understands the word literally. It has to be that you say Shema when people are going to sleep. The Chachamim, the rest of the sages, they say you can say Shema until midnight. And the last rabbi, Rabban Gamliel, he says you can say Shema until the morning, till the next day. I mean, until the sun comes, you're okay. Who does halakha follow? It doesn't say. That's the job of the Talmud, the next book, to figure it out. All the Dida Nasi is doing is recording what are the opinions that exist in the oral law. Which of those opinions are correct? Which one did we hear from Moshe Rabbeinu Mount Sinai? Let's figure it out. That's what the Talmud is there for. Were all three of them heard in Mount Sinai? No. It cannot be. It cannot be. And we know that. That's why we argue about the oral law. That's why we discuss the oral law. And that's why I said a statement at the beginning of this class. The Mishnah is not the oral law. It is a book of oral law. It's the best that we have in this tradition of oral law. I mean, you can ask questions. If there's something you don't understand, please don't be shy. We're learning together. Yes?
So Talmud basically doesn't say which opinion is correct.
That's the Mishnah. It doesn't say which opinion is correct.
But what Talmud does, it gets a conclusion?
Talmud literally means the study of the Mishnah. Okay. Now let's do the Talmud. Let's get there. That's a good. These, I'm on the bottom of page 3. These are the great sages who were part of the court of Rabbeinu HaKadosh and who received the tradition from him. I'm skipping. Page 3 in the right column. Rav composed the Sifra and the Sifrei. You see those books? They're in tiny little orange letters over here. To explain the sources for the Mishnah. Rabbi Chia composed the Tosefta. It's also over there. To explain the subjects in the Mishnah. Rabbi Hoshaya and Bar Kafra composed Beraitot to explain the matters discussed in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan composed the Jerusalem Talmud. You see that? The Talmud Yerushalmi. In Eretz Israel, in the land of Israel, approximately 300 years after the destruction of the temple. If you would like, I can send you a chart afterwards with actual dates. I don't have dates here, but this is the history. The period is the destruction of the temple, and the Jerusalem Talmud is written. Among the great sages who received the tradition, let's go to the bottom right. Ashley, let's do this.
Was the Bali and the Yerushalmi written at the same time?
I believe they began being written almost simultaneously, but the Bavli was ended much later. The Yerushalmi was written over a shorter span of time. Yes.
So what is this middle part?
Those are other books of rabbis. They're unlike the Mishnah, which are many rabbis. These are individual rabbis who wrote commentaries on the Mishnah. They're going to be like precursors to the Talmud. Yeah? The last words on page 3. Among the sages who received, top of page 4, the tradition from Rava were Rav Ashi and Ravina. Meir bar Rav Ashi received the tradition from Rav Ashi, his father, and from Ravina. And thus there were 40 generations from Rav Ashi back to Moshe, our teacher of blessed memory, and they were 1, 2, 3, 4, you can count them. That goes all the way to page 5. Find me on page 5. Look, see number 39. Yehoshua received the tradition from Moshe, our teacher. Moshe, our teacher, received the tradition from the Almighty, and thus the source of all these people's knowledge is Hashem, the Lord of Israel. You might think it's so many years. It's 40 rabbis in a row who received rabbi from rabbi from rabbi from rabbi, all the way till Moshe Rabbeinu. The oral law has, try this. Any rabbi, maybe not every rabbi you know. Chachamim of the previous generation. Go find them on Wikipedia. In there it'll say who was their rabbi. Click that link. On that next page it'll tell you who was that person's rabbi. Click that link. You can trace most of the Chachamim of the previous generation back to Moshe Rabbeinu. If you can't, at the very least, until the times of the Talmud. In which case, you can use this list to get you all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu. Your professor in university, you go to their Wikipedia page, you click their link, who was their teacher? You even know your professor's teacher? What about their teacher? No, the style of information there is knowledge. So you can get knowledge from everyone, and you have your own knowledge, you pass it on. The difference between that knowledge and the knowledge of our Chachamim is that our Chachamim's knowledge comes back at the end of the day. It's an oral law received from Hashem himself, given to Moshe on Mount Sinai. Now, someone can disagree. It could be a Kehillat, it could be a Sadducee, it could be whatever they wish. But in order to be part of rabbinic Judaism, we believe in the rabbis. That's why we're called rabbinic Jews. In the olden days, they used to call us, what did they call us in the days of Yeshu? Pharisees, Pushim. Okay, that's who we are. I once was sitting with a Christian man on the airplane. He must not have been an educated Christian. Educated Christians, they know what they're talking about. He told me, he's like, you remind me of a Pharisee. I said, I am a Pharisee. What do you offer me? This is what I am. Of course. He felt like he met the devil himself. Like he couldn't know. Why would he take credit for being a Pharisee? It happens. All the sages who were mentioned were the leaders of the generations. Among them were heads of academies, heads of the exile, and members of the great Sanhedrin. Together with them in each generation, there were thousands and myriads that heard their teachings. Like we mentioned before, there were many rabbis that studied, many students of the rabbis there. Everyone took notes. I see some people here taking a lot of notes. I see some people here taking light notes. I see some people here taking no notes. That's who's going to determine who's the leader of the next generation. Not for me, Chaz Shalom. But that's how it worked out. Who is the best note taker? Who can retain information the best? That's who made it. That's who made the cut. There are a lot of other rabbis aside from these 40 that we mentioned. But they're the ones in their generation, they made the cut. They passed the bar. They're the leader of the generation. In the bold words on page 5. Ravina and Rav Ashi were the final generation of the sages of the Talmud. So we start writing the Talmud to explain the Mishnah. Rav Ashi composed the Babylonian Talmud in Shin'ar. Where's Shin'ar? Babylon, today, somewhere in Iraq. I'm afraid I'm in an Iraqi. You could tell, by the way, when you read the Talmud, some of these rabbis are really Iraqi. You could tell from their...
Rabbi, wasn't it easier back then to explain things? The things were simpler. I mean, there was not as much complications. I mean, let's say they were talking about dishes. How many different types of dishes were there?
You were 70% right. So I'm going to stop you where you took a detour. It was simpler then, not because of the types of dishes. In fact, I think they had more complicated dishes than we have today. They're using bones of animals, clay pots, things made out of animal excrement. Like, I'm not putting... What they had is less opinions. When you have less opinions, things are much clearer. As we keep moving forward in Jewish history, and every new rabbi writes a book, you complicate the Jewish system. Because you start clogging it up with a lot of things. She's saying it got complicated. See, it used to be, let's say you're living in the generation of Yehoshua, what do you have to know? You have to know the 5 books of Moshe, and everything Moshe told you about it. By the time you pass 40 generations, you have to know the 5 books of Moshe, and everything that 40 generations said about it. And that's before we start becoming Sephardic and Ashkenazi and all those things. That's already more opinions. So you're right, things were simpler before. That's correct. Though, you had to know more. Like if you would know what a rabbi has to know to become a rabbi, no, it's a good thing not to be a rabbi. I can recommend to not be a rabbi. But if you know what a rabbi has to know to be a rabbi, it would be like if you go meet a doctor and say, oh, what did you study in medical school? He said, I studied a bone. One bone? Yeah, that's all I studied in medical school. It's unbelievable. To pass the test, to be called rabbi, it used to be you have to know everything. Today you have to know nothing. Even if you know nothing, they'll give you a diploma of rabbi. Today you can do mail order smicha. You can get in the WhatsApp, you get smicha. Yes.
What language? Like, how was this language of Mishnah and then language of...
That's a very good question. The Mishnah is written in Hebrew, and the Talmud is written in Judeo-Aramaic. It's Aramaic, but it's not like when you speak to someone no, there's a nation speak. The people here with us. Chaldeans, very good. They speak Aramaic, but their Aramaic is not Jewish Aramaic. It's kind of like I didn't want to speak about Yiddish. Let's put it this way. In Yiddish, okay, Yiddish is a good example. I met a former Mossad agent. He survived the Holocaust. He was a student of the Satmar Rebbe before the Holocaust. He helped smuggle him out of Europe. And then he joined the Mossad. And that was probably the only Zionist that the Satmar Rebbe ever spoke to, was the student of his. His name was Mr. Hollander. And we spoke, and I said, so, Mr. Hollander, do you speak Yiddish? He said, of course. I said, so can you say something in Yiddish? I don't speak Yiddish actively. I said, why not? He said, Yiddish is bad English, bad Hebrew, and bad German. I said, thank God, I'm an educated man. I speak a good Hebrew, a good English, and a good German, so why would I speak Yiddish? Yiddish is like Jewish street slang. You live in Germany, you live in countries, you take words. So in Yiddish, the way to say I am going to is the same as in German, I am going to. I don't actually know how to say that, I'm not supposed to speak Yiddish. But then the word for wedding in German is going to be, think of something and scream it very loud. And in Yiddish it's going to be chasna. What is a chasna? A chatuna in Hebrew is a chasna in Yiddish. And so the German guy and the Yiddish guy are going to speak to each other. I'm going to, they're going to understand that much. And then you say chasna, and he looks at you. What are you talking about? It's almost like why I look at you when you say chasna. I don't know what you're saying. Sefat lo yadati yeshma. David HaMelech says, I hear a language I never heard before. This is there because it's Judeo-German. Let's call it that. The Jews speak German.
Like
like Ladino. We do the same thing with Spanish. So Aramaic, it's our Aramaic. It's written in Hebrew letters. It's their language with a lot of Hebrew words, Greek words, a few other words mixed inside. That's the language of the Talmud because that generation, that's already the language the Jewish people are speaking. Kind of like today, you're going to get a book written in English because that's the language that the Jewish people are speaking here in this country.
In the generation of biblical Jews, did they speak Hebrew? Or
Yes. Yes.
So it evolved from Hebrew to Aramaic?
In all of the generations where Jews lived, listen to me very carefully, with the exception of perhaps some Eastern European communities, Jews always were able to have what do I mean Jews? Educated Jews. Those who studied. Those who didn't study, I can't say, had a command of the Hebrew language. Not just in prayers, this myth that Eliezer ben Yehuda, alav shalom, he was a special man. He revived the modern Hebrew language, but he wasn't the inventor of the Hebrew language. If you look in the records in Israel, 200 years before Ben Yehuda was born, the governments, the Turkish, the British governments spoke to the Jewish population living in Israel in Hebrew. In fact, the Shna Kadosh, Rabbi Yishayahu Levi Horowitz, he was an Ashkenazi Kabbalist. He became rabbi in Yerushalayim. And he writes in one of his diaries, the favorite part of him, he said, finally I'm a rabbi in Israel, in Yerushalayim, but the best part of me being a rabbi in Yerushalayim is that I'm able to give my sermons in Hebrew, and then he adds, with a Sephardic Havara, with a Sephardic accent. Because that was the spoken Hebrew in the land of Israel a few hundred years ago. The Shna Kadosh was an Ashkenazi rabbi, but he was a traitor to the Ashkenazi cause. A lot of the things you'll notice when you go to Israel, Ashkenazim do like Sfaradim, because the Shna Kadosh, he forced a lot of Sephardic customs on his Ashkenazi community. He was Ashkenazi, but he had a big leaning, probably because of his Kabbalistic side, to many Sephardic opinions, and he helped us out a little bit. The intent of both the Talmuds is to elucidate the words of the Mishnah, to explain its deeper points, and to relate the new matters that were developed by each court from the era of Rabbeinu HaKadosh until the composition of the Talmud. From the entire body of knowledge, the two Talmuds, the Tosefta, can be derived the forbidden and the permitted, the impure and the pure, the liable and those who are free of liability, the invalid and the valid, as was received in tradition one person from another, in a chain extending back to Moshe and Mount Sinai. We unfortunately today use the word tradition, you think like fiddler on the roof. Like tradition, whenever a Jew doesn't know why they're doing something stupid, they blame it on tradition. When Rambam uses the word tradition, he's not talking about fiddler on the roof. Tradition means, my rabbi heard this from his rabbi, heard it from this rabbi, from Moshe Rabbeinu on Mount Sinai. That's what tradition means. The word that they call today, minhag, it's a custom. When our Chachamim use the word minhag, it means something that rabbis enacted in a community that was people became accustomed to. Not some people decided that they should walk around the Torah scroll in one direction, and that's our custom. That's not a custom, that's just... Let's say there was a synagogue where they had a custom that when they would take the Sefer Torah, they would walk around the bima, and then they would stand in front of the ark, everybody would bow down, and then go again. And it became very complicated when they would dance around the bima and Simchat Torah. Every time they got there, everyone's ducking. It was so one of the kids, finally he grew up, he went to yeshiva, he said, listen, there's no custom in the world that every time you walk around the table, you bow down. So no, this is our tradition. And the elder people in the community screamed at him, traditions, when he shut up. But then one day he went back to the old synagogue in the old country where they came from, and he sees that it was in the basement of a building. And right on top of the old kodesh was a water pipe. It went like this and like that. And so in order to walk around the table, you had to bend down. Nothing to do with our kodesh. Nothing to do with the Torah. You just had to bend down. And that became the custom. Because in where we used to pray, we bow down. That's not a custom. That's just something silly that people do. When Chachamim used the word custom, it means there were maybe one opinion or two opinions, and this community, by the lead of their rabbis, accepted one of those as the custom of their community. Not that everybody, something you make up becomes a custom. once asked somebody a question. Oh, Rabbi, why is it that you do this? Oh, because all the Jews where I came from, this was our custom. I said, so what? It's against the rules of Jewish law, but it's our custom. Everybody does it that way. I said, imagine I'm going to tell you, I'm an American Jew. How many Jews are in America?
6 million.
6 million Jews? How many of those Jews keep Shabbat?
600,000.
We're lucky. Oh, good. 600,000. I even know the rabbi who made all of them religious. So,
Oh, it's that little?
yeah, not a big number. So I'm going to tell you, the minhag of America is we don't keep Shabbat. What kind of lunacy is that? The Torah says to keep Shabbat. You don't keep Shabbat for personal reasons. I'm not getting in your business right now. But don't sell it as, the Jewish custom breaks Jewish law. If that was true, you wouldn't have to eat kosher. You wouldn't have to eat Shabbat. You wouldn't have to go to synagogue and Yom Kippur. Who cares? Customs don't work just what they do on the street. Customs are things that our rabbis introduced into the Jewish community. Also, the sources mentioned above relate those matters which were decreed by the sages and prophets in each generation in order to build a fence around the Torah. We love this word here. We spoke about this in our second class, right? In the last class. What does it mean to build a fence around the Torah? It's not like, I don't want you to... There's a wisdom behind this. What's the wisdom?
So you don't break the main law.
Very good. You don't come to break the actual law. I tell my child, hey, the street is dangerous. But he doesn't know the street is dangerous. He thinks he can hang around the driveway. Well, the driveway is not dangerous. My sidewalk is not dangerous. Because he doesn't know, what I tell him is, don't pass the front door of the house without me being outside. That's a fence. He's not going to get hurt if he's in front of my front door. But I make that fence so he doesn't run into the street. But like I said, at a certain point in time, my child should be trusted enough either to go out to the driveway alone or to cross the street alone, or to at least know that the reason why he doesn't go outside of the front door is not against the law. It's just, that's something he does to stay safe. That level of you're allowed to make fences, but there has to be a level of education that comes along with that fences. You can make fences in Jewish law. The HaShamayim have the right to enact fences. On condition that they educate the community, this is a fence. I have the right to make a fence. The HaShamayim have a right to make a fence. But you have to know that it's a fence. That's what it is. It's not a law. We were explicitly taught about this practice by Moshe as implied by the verse in Vayikra. And you shall observe my precepts, which can be interpreted to mean, make safeguards for my precepts. Similarly, it includes the customs and ordinances that were ordained or practiced in each generation. According to the judgment of the governing court of the generation, it's forbidden to deviate from these decisions. As it applied in Dvarim, do not deviate from the instructions they will give you left or right. Let's skip to the bold paragraph here on page 6. Whatever I'm skipping, I suggest you read on your own later. Thus, Ravina, Rav Ashi, and their colleagues represent the final era of the great sages of Israel who transmitted the oral law. They passed decrees, ordained practices, and put into effect customs. These decrees, ordinances, and customs spread out among the entire Jewish people in all the places where they lived. The Talmud is the last book of Jewish law that is universal in the Jewish community. The Jewish community who follows rabbinic law, the Talmud is our last book. After the court of Rav Ashi, so after this, look at my chart, I don't know where I put it. Here. You're talking about the end of the Talmud. That ends the last unanimous Jewish work that was ever written. Here, that's a unanimous vote. After that, that's where we start to get complicated. That's really what I came here to talk to you about.
So when we have the Sanhedrin, right?
Someone help me out with the year that we're talking about? Yeah, it's the sealing of the Talmud.
300 AD or something?
After Christ.
Yes, it's after Yeshua. That's right. It's after the second temple. You already see at the end of the Talmud a lot of stuff about the temple being destroyed. Like that's the end of that era. Yes. So after the court of Rav Ashi composed the Talmud and completed in the time of his son, the Jewish people became further dispersed throughout all the lands. There was a temple destroyed. We were exiled. Reaching the distant extremes of the fire-moved islands, strife sprung up throughout the world and the paths of travel became endangered by troops. Torah study decreased and the Jews ceased entering their yeshivot in the thousands and myriads. It was customary previously. What Rabbi Yehuda Nasi had foreseen actually happened. The Jewish people became further dispersed. It became more dangerous to be Jewish. They were killing people in the street for studying Torah. And That's why he wrote down this oral law in the first place. Instead, individuals, the remnants whom Hashem called, would gather in each city and country, occupy themselves in Torah study, and devote themselves to understanding the text of the sages and learning the path of judgment from them. So look at you. How many Jews are in Los Angeles? How many Jews from Los Angeles study Torah? How many of those Jews who are studying Torah in Los Angeles are studying about how to tie amulets around their nose? And from those people who are left, how many are actually sitting down and studying Torah? That's the same thing that happens here. There's a big Jewish community, but only remnants that Hashem has called out to them have decided to take upon themselves time out of their life to actually study Torah. Every court that was established after the conclusion of the Talmud, regardless of the country in which it was established, issued decrees, enacted ordinances, established customs of the people of that country. These practices, however, were not accepted throughout the Jewish people because of the distance between their settlements and the disruption of communication between them. Let's talk reality. Jews find themselves in Spain. They find themselves in Rome. They find themselves in Yemen. They find themselves in France, in Germany, in North Africa. It spreads from there. I'm not ending. Every rabbi has a yeshiva, has a synagogue, has a rabbinic court. And there are new questions that come up in North Africa or in France or wherever it's going to happen. And those rabbis rule over new issues that come to them. Unlike the Talmud, though, when a rabbi in France rules something, the rabbi in Germany doesn't know about it. The rabbi in North Africa doesn't know about it. The communication between these communities is very weak. And since, bold words, this is very crucial to know and to understand and should be plastered over every synagogue in the world. Since each of these courts were considered to be individual courts, and the high court of 71 judges, that's called in Sanhedrin, in Greek, in Hebrew, had been defunct for many years before the composition of the Talmud, people in one country could not be compelled to follow the practices of another country, nor is one court required to sanction decrees which another court had declared in its locale. You're a rabbi of the Ashkenazi Jewish community. You came up with a decree. The people in your community must listen to you. But you don't have the right to force that decree on the community neighboring you in Worms. You can't do that to a community sitting in North Africa. You can't do that to a community sitting in Iran or Iraq. You don't have the right to do that because you're an individual court. You're not a national court of the Jewish people. Until today, this is the same thing. I'm going to do my plug right now. Watch. It's the chief rabbinate of Israel. It's an incredible concept that could have gone very well. It didn't, but it could have gone very well. There's far-reaching tentacles of the chief rabbinate of Israel, in which there's a certain understanding that certain rabbis are mainstream rabbis, and other ones are not. Certain rabbis can decide that someone is Jewish, and certain rabbis can't. Certain rabbis can decide something is kosher, and certain rabbis can't. Who decides that? The chief rabbi of the world. Who's the chief rabbi of the world? Nobody. There is no central Jewish court that exists in the world today. Even today. Someone could call themselves the center authority of... Listen, there's a reason why someone is a chief rabbi and I'm sitting here at a table in Rabbi Ben's against Bekesed. I'm not taking away from them. They clearly did enough to get to that place. I'm not Chaz Shalom denigrating that position. But no court, regardless of where it sits or who it is or how great they are, has authority over another body of rabbis. And that means that if all the rabbis in Los Angeles got together and decided there's one rabbi here they don't like, it doesn't make a difference. Who cares? Oh, you can even add all the rabbis here and in San Diego and in New York, and all of them are going to say, hey, this kosher symbol, we don't like it. Who cares? Is the one who gives that kosher symbol a Talmid Chacham? Yes. Does he follow the rules of Jewish law according to the way he received it from his rabbis and the way he understands it with his logic? Yes. So it's nice that a lot of you got together. It's nice when people get together. It's a good thing. Especially when rabbis get together. It could be a miracle. When is it going to be rabbis get together? Normally to condemn other people. But they don't have any authority more than you give them. You give those groups of people authority. If everyone says, hey, Rabbi, we love you, but who cares what you say? Then that's all the power they have. What are they going to do? Sue you for not listening to them? People complain, oh, the mainstream community. Who's making this mainstream? The Rambam says, after the sealing of the Talmud, everybody's an individual. Judaism, it's not anarchy, but Judaism becomes privatized. We're no longer part of a big system anymore. There's a downside to that. Of course, that's what we're paying the price for today. But bullying people into following you is not the way to unite everybody together either. And that's at the core of the philosophy, not of the Rambam or of our camp, that's the core of Jewish philosophy is this. Everything after the Talmud cannot be forced upon anybody else. Similarly, if one of the Geonim, who are the Geonim? Let's find them. You see the purple box? See, those are rabbis that come two levels after the Talmud.
Why do Sephardic people have to follow the shofar?
Wait, we're going to get there. Don't worry. And I didn't say that, but we're going to get there. Similarly, if one of the Geonim interpreted the path of judgment in a certain way, while the court which arose afterwards interpreted the proper approach to the matter in a different way, the opinion of the first need not be adhered to absolutely. Rather, whichever position appears to be correct, whether the first or the last, is accepted. Who makes that decision? Not some person on the street. Hanan and I spoke after last class. Not everybody is going to now become a posek. But there are people that this is their job. They're trained, they're learned their whole life to make such decisions. You don't have a need to say, that rabbi is older than me, and therefore, what can I do? He said it, you're allowed to have a say. You have an educated decision, you're part of a tradition of oral law, you have an opinion. You are also, everyone who's sitting here, you're the next level in an unbroken chain of Moshe Rabbeinu. One day, you're going to be, you might not like the pressure, you're going to teach your kids Torah, you're going to sit at a Shabbat table this week, and you're going to choose the most controversial thing I said today and share it with somebody else. You are a passer on of oral Torah. That's what you're doing. And now you just have to make sure if you're going to make the cut or not. That's up to you. But that's what we're doing. That's what the Chachamim have been doing forever. To use your logic. That's an obligation on you. These principles apply regarding the judgments, decrees, ordinances, and customs were established after the conclusion of the Talmud. However, all the matters mentioned by the Babylonian Talmud are incumbent on the entire Jewish people to follow. What's written in the Talmud is the law. There's nothing you can do about it. Anything that happens after the Talmud, you can't force someone to do anymore.
Unless we reestablish its sin.
That's right. We're going to get to this whole genre of discussion. Yes, please.
Before we go further, when did Sephardim and Ashkenazim actually
Right now.
started to?
Right now.
Oh, okay.
So you're at the right part of history right now. All the sages who arose after the conclusion of the Talmud and comprehended its wisdom, page 7, and whose prowess gained them a reputation are called the Geonim. All these Geonim that arose in Eretz Israel, Babylonia, Spain, France, taught the approach of the Talmud, revealing its hidden secrets and explaining its points, since the Talmud's manner of expression is very deep. Furthermore, it is composed in Aramaic with a mixture of other languages. This language was understood by the people of Babylonia in the era when the Talmud was composed. However, in other places, and even in Babylonia in the era of the Geonim, a person cannot understand this language unless he has studied it. Aramaic is a complicated language. The way the Talmud is written is also a complicated style. If I could explain very briefly, the way the Talmud is written, the Mishnah is written in an order. Remember, there's a topic and there are opinions. How is the Talmud written? The Talmud has, I'm not saying this, God forbid, the Talmud has ADD. Why? Imagine a room like this. We say, today we're going to discuss, when do we say Shema at night? And so we say something. It's, oh wait, you said Rabban Gamliel? I remember something else Rabban Gamliel told me. So you mentioned that also. And the whole time you're doing this, there's a stenographer. You ever seen a stenographer before? It's the person in the courtroom that looks like Chazal, they're having some kind of seizure. They're writing, they're recording everything that's being said here. You said this, he said that, she said that. They're writing it all down. That is the Talmud. Now you read the Talmud, you have to make sense of a conversation that happened 1,000 years ago and understand what does it want from you. Sometimes the Talmud argues and argues and argues and argues and argues and says, well, we don't know the right answer. What do you do then? Yeah, it doesn't know. But that's the Talmud. That's the way Talmud is written. And Talmud is a conversation. And that conversation has continued. All the rabbis of all the generations, the Rambam, the Rif, the Rosh, even rabbis, Rabbi Mari Yosef, Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, they kept writing and writing and writing. The difference between those rabbis and the rabbis that came before, aside from seniority and age, is that the words of the Talmud are authoritative and you can compel the Jewish community to follow them. The words that come afterwards, nobody can compel me to follow the ruling of another Chacham unless you can prove to me that that is something that the Talmud would demand from me as well. Let's look at the bold paragraph on page 7. At this time, we have been beset by additional difficulties. Everyone feels, you see, the Jewish history, it just gets worse. It doesn't get better. Things are getting worse and worse and worse. Everyone feels financial pressure. The wisdom of our sages has become lost. and the comprehension of our men of understanding has become hidden. This is the Rambam's attempt as a subtle jab. What is he telling you?
No one knows anything.
No one knows anything. The Rambam in his life, I feel for the Rambam sometimes when I read his letters. See, you read his books, Rambam is the greatest thing who lived. You read his letters, and you're like, oh my gosh, why did the Rambam have to put up with those people? What did he do wrong? That he has to, the chief rabbi of the greatest community, and I'm not going to mention names, I don't want to get into politics here. That's what it says in the letters of the Rambam. And the rabbi writes him a letter, and the Rambam is scratching his head because, like, hey, this is the 3rd chapter of the Torah. You don't even know it. Why are you the chief rabbi anywhere? How could you not know this? And the Rambam spends much of his life dealing with sages who are inferior in wisdom to him. And what do? The Rambam had a lot of patience. A lot of patience. There's a famous letter. I quoted it in one of my articles on the internet. The Rambam heard that one of his students was in a class, and that rabbi was mocking the Rambam. So a student goes, hey, how could you speak about my teacher like that? And he was fighting with him. And the Rambam writes him a letter. And he says, why are you arguing with people? He says, stupid people, I don't waste my time to argue with them. My wife always says, when you argue with a fool, they drag you down to their level and then they beat you with experience. And this is like, fools are fools. They're so good at this. The Rambam says, don't engage with foolish people. He said, so what? They're going to speak bad things about me? Says the Rambam, good. He says the Halacha. Halacha says, I'll give you an example. Let's say you're walking by somebody's yard here. I don't know what's like. There's a fence, and someone has a nice tree growing in their yard. Are you allowed to sit in the shade of their tree? In public property? You're on the sidewalk. Can you sit in the shade of their tree? Yeah. Can he say, hey, I want to charge you for my shade? Maybe. He could take it to court. You know what the court is going to do to him? The court is going to beat him. Why? Because technically you could charge me for sitting in the shade of your tree on public property. But what kind of person are you? You come from Sdom? They call it Midat Sdom. It's a character trait. Someone says, hey, can I light my candle from your candle? What are you going to lose from? Are you going to lose some fire from them? You don't lose anything when someone lights a candle from my candle. Says the Rambam, anything that someone is going to benefit from and I'm not going to lose from, it's forbidden for me to stop them from enjoying it. Says this fool clearly is making himself famous by arguing with the Rambam. He says, if that's good for him, then I'm not allowed to tell him no. Because he's enjoying it and it doesn't bother me. Understand the greatness of such a chacham? It doesn't bother. The truth is the truth. I don't need you. So the Rambam is famous. He says, even if 1 million people are going to say the truth is false, it doesn't make a difference. And if 1 million people tell you that a fallacy is the truth, it also doesn't make a difference. The truth and numbers have nothing to do with each other. We are proof of that. We said how many Jews in America? 6 million. How many Jews in the world? 13, 14, 12. Pessimist, realist, optimist. Yes? Let's include a few 100,000 Jews and maybe not Jewish. We'll add them to 15 million Jews. How many Christians are there in the world?
2 billion. I don't know.
At least 1 billion? How many Muslims in the world?
Almost 1 billion.
1 billion?
There's more Christians.
How are we right? We're only 13, 14, like the bottom of the barrel. Inherent in our faith is we don't care about numbers. We don't care about a mainstream that's part of our religion. If we were mainstream, we'd be Muslims already. We'd become Catholic a long time ago. The truth is the truth, and we've been protectors of the truth for thousands and thousands of years. And the Rambam says, therefore, look at the bottom of page 7. I girded my loins. Well, let's read the rest of that paragraph that was bold. Therefore, those 3 paragraphs up on page 7. Therefore, those explanations, laws, and replies which the Gaonim composed and considered to be fully explained material have become difficult to grasp in our age, and only a select few comprehend these matters in the proper way. Therefore, the bottom of page 7, I girded my loins. That sounds better in Hebrew than in English. I, Moshe, the son of Maimon of Spain, I relied upon the rock, blessed be he. You know that word, the rock, tzu. It's a very important word. It was used recently in Jewish history. Someone know where?
My son and his daughter.
Okay.
Tired sword.
It was a famous document that was written recently. Anyone know? 1948. Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel. You had rabbis that sat on that committee declaring independence, and you had Jews that not only didn't believe in Hashem, but they believed there was no Hashem. The rabbis wanted to write in there, God, Hashem. And the socialists among them said, no, we don't want to. So what do? there was a rabbi there who suggested a compromise. Let's write, we lean on the rock of Israel. A religious person reads the rock of Israel, Tzur Yisrael, and we know that's referring to Hashem. But if you're a socialist, believe in Hebrew pride in 1948, the strength of Israel, the rock of Israel, it's a vague term that can mean whatever it needs to mean for whoever is writing it. It's a very wise decision. People still hate on it. When you hear religious people who are anti-Zionist, they always, oh look, they didn't even put God's name in the Declaration of Independence. Yeah, if you read it like an atheist, you're not going to find God's name. If you read it like the Rambam, he even uses the word himself. Maybe they're going to tell you the Rambam was an atheist. I don't know how to answer that. Remember I told you they'll beat you with experience. I contemplated all these texts and sought to compose a work which would include the conclusions derived from all these texts regarding the forbidden and the permitted, the impure and the pure, and the remainder of the Torah's laws, all in clear and concise terms, so the entire oral law could be organized in each person's mouth without questions or objections. Instead of arguments, this one claiming such and another such, this text will allow for clear and correct statements based on the judgment that results from all the texts and explanations mentioned above, from the days of Rabbeinu HaKadosh until today. To summarize, 8 pages later, the intent of this text is that a person will not need another text at all with regard to any Jewish law. Rather, this text will be a compilation of the entire oral law, including also the ordinances, customs, and decrees that were enacted from the time of Moshe, our teacher, until the completion of the Talmud, as were explained by the Geonim, the text that completed the Talmud. Therefore, I have called this text Mishneh Torah, the second to the Torah, with the intent that a person should first study the written law, and then study this text, and comprehend the entire oral law from it, without having to study any other text between the two. Chava, what do you do on the eve of Pesach? Stressed. Come to our Pesach class. You're not going to be stressed.
I know, I watched it last year.
See, there's one thing watching it, another thing doing it.
I did it.
Baruch Hashem, so you shouldn't have been...
No, I'm no longer.
Okay, Baruch Hashem. We're going to take her testimonial after. It's hard with the camera afterwards. Stress-free Pesach. What happens at the end of Pesach? You search for chametz the night before, and then the day of, you burn it. The Jewish pyromaniacs have it. You got to burn it. You see these little kids in Jerusalem, they throw everything in the fire. And that smell of all the fires burning everywhere, you might not smell it in LA. That's when there's a riot. But in Israel, when you smell the fire, you know it's Erev Pesach or Lag B'Omer, too, also a riot. You smell the fire. As the Rambam is writing these letters, there's fires happening in the Jewish community. People are taking the Rambam's books and tossing them into the fire. Who is this heretical Sephardic rabbi? This crazy man. He thinks that his book is the second to the Torah? Who does he think he is? This presumptuous, arrogant man. We have a Torah, and we have volumes and volumes of Talmud and writings of the Geonim, and he says he's going to come along and simplify it so people can have access to the Torah and study it for themselves? Who does he think he is? So that happens every generation. We're not sure if the anger to the Rambam is pure hatred, or it's jealousy, because he did it and we couldn't, or it's giving access to the people to things that snobs like to keep to themselves for many generations, or a combination of all those things together. But the Rambam's books begin to get burned en masse by Sfaradim and Ashkenazim alike. Both are guilty of this crime. I suggest an article. I'm not part of this camp. I don't know much. I suggest an article, though. Anyways, a person has to be well read. There's an article by Chacham Jose Faur called "Anti-Maimonidean Demons." It's 50 pages. If you thought this was long, and you're going to need a dictionary to understand the English. It's unbelievable to see. You think the Jewish community today is political? Generations after the Rambam, rabbis lose their jobs for studying Rambam. People who hate the Rambam are firing chief rabbis of entire countries to put their students inside, just so the Rambam's words cannot be entered in the Beit Midrash. All because of what? Because he wanted to write a clear book so that every Jewish person wouldn't have to sit down and study the Tanakh, and study the Mishnah, and study the Talmud, the Sifra, the Jerusalem Talmud, Babylonian Talmud, the Simoraim, the Geonim. Just you can come and read a book and tell you how to keep Shabbat. That's what it does. That's what made them so mad. For what? What did he do to them? What did the Rambam do? What did he sin against the people? Today, Baruch Hashem, I don't think the Rambam enjoyed to see the success of today. I mean, we need a second Rambam today anyways, for other reasons. But even in the places you would never think that people believe in the philosophy of the Rambam, in terms of Jewish law, the Rambam is a staple. It's a fundamental book. I don't know of a rabbinic institution in the world in which the texts of the Rambam are not studied. I can't promise you they're always followed, but in which they're studied. The Rambam's place in the Beit Midrash is, wow, that's the Rambam. I want to embarrass my wife for a minute. My first date with my wife. I met her in a, they do weird things in the religious community. I met her in a hotel lobby in Jerusalem. And we're sitting across the table from each other. She ordered only water, because if I would pay money for her date, she'd have to commit the second one, and she didn't want to. She still does that today. She doesn't want to make sure she comes tomorrow. And we're talking, and this and that, and my wife is from a very old, staunch Hasidic group. My wife's grandparents on both sides sat at the table of the Baal Shem Tov. I mean, they're like Hasidic indoctrinated into Hasidut. They're part of the roots of the Hasidic.
That's why we go through a conversion program.
And we were talking about this, and then she said something, and I'm like, oh, the Rambam says, and she says, she doesn't believe this today, don't worry. She said, who follows the Rambam? And I looked at her, I did it in my chair. Thoughts went through my mind at that moment. The first thing I want to know was, are you Jewish? Who follows the Rambam? Are you Jewish? And then we had a fascinating conversation. If the Rambam would say something, and your Hasidic Rebbe would say the opposite, who would you follow? No, not you.
No, she.
Her. Of course my Rebbe. If Moshe Rabbeinu was here right now, we're holding the 10 Commandments, and your rabbi would say one of those 10 Commandments is wrong, who would you follow? My Rebbe. So the answer to the question was, she's biologically Jewish, but we have to work on some things. The truth is, there's a whole world that has this attitude of, I'm taking the Rambam's name out, of who cares about Jewish law? Who cares what it says in the books of the Mishnah and the Talmud? This is our cut. This is the way we do things. A rabbi wrote me a letter about 4 years ago, when I first published my book. I have copies over there. If anybody wants, you can't afford it, please just come to me and take a copy. Don't worry. If you can afford it, afford it. If you can afford more, that's Rachel. She takes donations for the synagogue. So just she's standing up. What was I telling you now?
4 years ago.
4 years ago, I wrote my book. A rabbi from California wrote me a letter. He had big eyes. He said, Dayan, Rabbi Halevi, the things you wrote in your book are wrong. Even for Sfaradim. That's what he wrote. Even for both. Even. So I wrote back a letter also. I said, dear Rabbi, here's a copy of my book. In my book, there are about 400 sources. If you'd like to send me an intelligent letter back, arguing with any of the 400 sources, you're more than welcome to. But until then, just because you can scream loud doesn't make you right. I said a little bit nicer than that. The truth is that we have sources, and any Jewish community that follows Judaism that has no sources, it's not a Jewish community. It's Jewish, but it's not actually following Jewish law. Jewish law is important. You can argue about what is Jewish law. This rabbi says, fine, I'm willing to say there are more flavors in Jewish law than one. But a Jewish community that doesn't follow the legalities of Judaism, what kind of community is it? And to end here with the Rambam's words, actually it doesn't make a difference here. To finish this. In your chart, the Rambam left for us 14 volumes of his Code of Jewish Law, which teaches us from the morning till the evening, from the beginning of the year till the end of the year, from the first day you're born till the day Chasum a person leaves this world, everything a person needs to know. As time goes on,
Where is the Rambam's time on the slide?
I'm going to show you right now. As time goes on, the Rambam is here. There's a Rif and a Rosh. The Alphas is Rif for Yitzchak Al-Fasi. Where's he from?
Morocco.
Fez, Morocco, Al-Fasi. That's the Rambam is from where? Spain, North Africa, Egypt. The Rosh is Germany. He's the last of the rabbis of the Tosafot. He later becomes a rabbi in Spain. Spain. A lot of people, the current chief rabbi in Israel likes to blame the Moroccans that all of their customs are Ashkenazi customs. Unfortunately, what? Al-Fasi, Rabbi Yitzchak Al-Fasi. I'm going to post some of these in Wikipedia so you can look them up on the classroom. A lot of the old Moroccan customs, Moroccan Jews, many of them are Nigorashim. They come from Castilla, from that area. Their rabbi was the Rosh. He was an Ashkenazi rabbi who took a Sephardic pulpit. And because of that, there are some customs, they are Ashkenazi, but they didn't happen 50 years ago. Their rabbi from many generations ago had a tradition of certain ways that they did things, and that's the way they follow it. You could argue with that approach, but it's an old Jewish approach. There's a book called the Turim. The Turim is the precursor to the modern code of Jewish law. It's written by the son of the Rosh. And then we have a Shulchan Aruch. Maran, Rabbi Yosef Karo, writes a book of Jewish law that matches up to the Turim. Next time's class is my last introduction. After that, we dig our heels into some serious stuff. Not that this isn't serious. Next week, I want to discuss with you about the Shulchan Aruch. And I know that I'm up against a pack of wolves, because I know some people here around this table. I know Shulchan Aruch, this, that. I'm going to tell you. Sfaradim have a rule. Before this, I'll tell you, there's a general rule. The rule is, there's no rule without exceptions. Except for that rule. There's no rule that has no except for that rule. Meaning, this rule has no exceptions. All rules have exceptions. There's a term in the Sephardic community, all Sephardim, we follow Shulchan Aruch. Obviously, that's not a, except for when we don't, right? We, though, like to hate on Ashkenazim when they don't follow the Shulchan Aruch. We do that all the time. But if they would point back at us some 36 fingers of where we don't follow Shulchan Aruch, that's going to be next week's shiur, as well as if I have time, I hope to walk with you one halakha, one detail of halakha, from when the Torah was given on Mount Sinai, to the Mishnah, to the Talmud, through the Rambam, the Rif, and the Rosh, to the Torah, to the Shulchan Aruch, and as you practice it today. We'll take one detail of a law all the way through, because that's going to set the pace of what we do for every other class after that. Every other class after that class is going to be, we're going to choose a topic, and that topic is going to start at the earliest source where this issue comes up. Some of them are biblical, some of them are rabbinic, so it depends if it's in the Tanakh or in the Mishnah or the Talmud. And we're going to follow all those sources until contemporary people who are alive in our generation, I mentioned Rabbi Var Yosef, or Moshe Feinstein, all the Chachamim that are around. And we're going to discuss, so we're going to talk about kashrut. You want to talk about, give me a topic?
Shabbat.
I said kashrut. Which topic in kashrut? Well, tell me one. You also said Shabbat. You said the same?
No.
You're going to have a class together.
Milk and meat.
Milk and meat. Okay, milk and meat. We're going to take that from Tanakh to the Mishnah, to the Talmud, to the Rambam, to the Rif, Rosh, Shulchan Aruch, and all the ramifications, all the different places. That's going to be more than one class. But we spoke once about gelatin. We spoke once about Chalav Yisrael. We're going to talk about glatt kosher meat versus not glatt kosher meat. We want to talk about Pesach is coming up. We're going to talk about things that are not connected to kashrut at all. Things like abortion in Jewish law. Things like how marriages work, or divorces, or mamzerim, or what happens. All kinds of topics. Whatever topic you want to bring up. The way we're going to study it from here on is not, hey, I'm a rabbi. I came to give a class in LA. I'm going to waste an hour of your time. And everything you're going to have is going to have sources to it. You don't have to agree with anything that I ever say. Everything that I have is to present you with all the sources that you have to make an educated decision. That's my job. The decision part is your job. My job is to teach you how to learn things properly so you can own the Torah that you study. So you can come to Shabbat and say, Judaism doesn't. Abortion is a good topic now. I'm going to end with this. I'm sorry. I know the time. Judaism is against abortion. There was a famous Nazi. His name was Joseph Goebbels. That's how you say his name? Goebbels. His name should be erased and destroyed. He had a famous statement in which he said, whoever wins the language wins the war. In the war of propaganda, the best word that you can come up with, if you know how to say things properly, you won already. You don't have to actually be right. You just have to know how to say it correctly. You want to present something? Present it properly. In the world of politics, and I never speak politics, why? Hevel havalim amal Kehillat, it's useless. The State Department is not calling you. They're not calling me. I have no intention to speak politics. This is a halachic issue, what I'm bringing up now. How many, I saw a few doctors on my email list. How many of you are medical professionals? Raise your hand. So it's a good place to get sick. Okay, have some help. The laws of abortion. Should a child be able to be aborted? A baby? What part? Which trimester? For what reason? Is it? Could it be rape? Could it be was an unintended pregnancy? It could be the baby's sick. Could be the baby's going to have a mental issue. Whatever topics will come up. Jews have developed some kind of approach that we're Catholic. That's like the new Jewish thing. We became Judeo-Christians. I don't know when that happened. Not in my religion, but it's happened. And somehow Jews and Christians are the same thing. It can be, or else we'd be Christians. And we've decided that Jews are against abortions. And there's another camp that decided, no, Jews are for abortions. And both those people are lying to you. There's good propaganda. Nobody talks today about abortion. That's not the topic people bring up. What do they talk about? Are you pro-life or are you pro-choice? What's the point of that argument? If you say that you're against abortions, you want to take away people's freedoms? You want the government to control your life? Are you against choice? Which human being is against choice? All of a sudden you put me I'm on defense. You believe that someone is not to have an abortion? They should have an abortion?
Yeah.
You're not pro-life. You don't care about lives. You don't care about human beings. Da, 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 da. All of this is mindless chatter. Nobody's dealing with the issue here. Is a baby alive? Is a baby not alive? On 1 foot. I'm not telling you a halachic ruling here. Judaism, Baruch Hashem, has nuance to it. It's something that most Jews miss. Most Jews think Judaism is black and white. The things in Judaism that are black and white, you could probably count them on a hand. In Judaism, you're not allowed to murder. That's a prohibition. The definition of murder, though, has to have a few factors in that equation. It could be that a baby, until a certain point of its development as an embryo, is considered a life. A life is not the same thing as a person. Killing a life is prohibited by the Torah, like murdering a person is prohibited by the Torah. Unless there's another variable that gets plugged into the equation, like someone else's life, who's actually a person. A mother. Some rabbis would even include the mental well-being of the mother or father after such a child will be born. And therefore, there are cases in which Chachamim will allow for an abortion, because Judaism is not against abortion. It's against a free-for-all abortion, perhaps, but not against abortion. In fact, if somebody were to prohibit abortion, you would put us rabbis in trouble, because Bechol Yom, every day we allow people to abort babies. The moment that becomes illegal for us, you tie our hands. You know that when you, Chaz v'shalom, nobody here should ever have to experience the tragedy of needing an abortion. When someone calls a Talmid Chacham and says, Rabbi, we need to go through an abortion, it's not a you and me, there's a level of security clearance to answer such questions. Which kind of doctor do we prefer? A Jewish doctor or a non-Jewish doctor to do the abortion? A non-Jewish doctor? Tell me, who do you sell your chametz to before Pesach?
Non-Jew.
Right, okay, that makes sense. But in abortions, it's not the same thing. We don't sell our abortions to non-Jews. To the contrary. A non-Jewish person has how many commandments? 7. One of them is do not kill. How much nuance is in the non-Jewish commandment of do not kill? None. It's do not kill. Whatever definition that is. According to halakha, though, I just mentioned to you, there's a life, taking of a life, there's murder, there's premeditated murder, there's intentional killing versus unintentional killing. If a non-Jewish doctor were to perform an abortion, we would be setting them up to violate a biblical commandment. When we send someone to the hospital to have an abortion, we specifically look for a Jewish doctor. Because according to Jewish law, the Jewish doctor's hands are not tied like a non-Jewish doctor is, even if the non-Jewish doctor doesn't believe in the 7 laws of Noah. I didn't tell you now that you can do abortions. I told you that everything in Judaism has nuance. And when I hear Jewish issues, simple things like kashrut, complicated things like abortions, things in the middle like Shabbat or tefillin or going to relatives' houses, when those things are taught without nuance, it's all a lie. Because there's no nuance there. There's no sophistication there. And that's what we hope to have here. I'm going to assign a chapter of my book to read for the next class. If you can get the book, I strongly recommend it because it's going to be the second chapter of that book. The first chapter of that book. If you can't, I'm going to post the PDF for those who can't handle it. I'll post that onto the group, the Google Classroom. We'll read that for 2 weeks from now, and we'll discuss that, and there'll be a lot of papers to print next week. Please do not be intimidated by the Hebrew. I will walk you through every single thing that is in Hebrew, even if you're holding the page the wrong way. Chava, have a beautiful night. I'm going to stick around for a few minutes, B'ezras Hashem, and then we're going to head back to Los Angeles. And I want to say what I said last time. To San Diego. I want to say what I said last week, which is we have a beautiful community in San Diego, and we have some beautiful people that I would love for you to meet because I love you guys and I love who's in San Diego. If you wish to join us for a Shabbat, for something, for a holiday that's coming up, for a weekend, just come, tell me you need a place to stay. I will make it happen for you. All your meals will be with me and my Kehillat. And B'ezras Hashem, I would love for you to come down to San Diego and meet us. I know people in LA, they think like San Diego, they think SeaWorld and tequila in Mexico. They don't think there's anything in San Diego. There is. You don't need a passport to get to San Diego if you're, if you have one. And B'ezras Hashem, I would love to host you. Please have a beautiful evening, and we're sticking around for a little bit. B'ezras Hashem.